Hey everybody, my name's Charlie McCarthy. This is a new Google Hangout called Down But Not Out. It's going to focus on people in sports, players, coaches, administrators who have dealt with adversity or challenging situations, overcame it, and are thriving again. And joining us tonight, one of my closest friends. He's currently the one half of the Brooklyn Nets radio team. He's the radio analyst, former D1 head coach, basketball. Tim Capstraw. Capper, as he's affectionately known to his friends. Thanks for joining me.
Charlie, great to be here.
Cap, before we get into the main topic, let me just let's give a little intro, a little background of you. You're from upstate New York, Utica, I know. What was it like growing up in Utica?
Utica was great. I think when I look at it right now and people evaluate where you're from, it seems like a small town. It didn't seem like a small town growing up. It seemed like a perfect town. And great experience, great high school. Was a good athlete, so that really helped. And my evolution though became when I actually left high school and went to college at Wagner College in Staten Island, New York, and then I became a New Yorker and met people on Staten Island much like yourself.
I appreciate that, Cap. Actually, one thing I wanted to ask you, because I understand you're the youngest of how many siblings?
Seven.
Seven. But now your father died when you were young, I believe.
Yes, when I was 11 years old.
So at the time, or even looking back now, did you see that, or do you see that as kind of a challenging situation growing up, getting that around?
Sure it was, but I had this incredibly strong mom who didn't let it be. She didn't make it be. She wouldn't let us, harp on it too long, and it was very difficult for her, and she had to go to work, and it was very hard. But at the time, I thought she did an amazing job of downplaying it and saying that, hey, life goes on, and we've got to be tough, and we can take care of things. And I have an awful lot of respect. Became very close with her because although you said I was the youngest of seven, there was an age gap between myself and my closest sibling of almost like 4.5 years. So there was a lot of time where I had a significant different relationship with my mother than, and a number of the other people in my family were not in the home at the time. So it was very tough, but not as tough because, I don't know, sometimes those Irish people, they kind of shake off things pretty good. And I think my mom was a tough Irish broad, and she said, "Hey, let's just strap it on. Let's go. Let's move forward."
And I guess some of the lessons that she taught you back then, you have more of an appreciation for now, especially as a parent yourself.
Oh, absolutely, and the caring nature of living with just a mom and all that, and just appreciating the time. My kids are in that age range right now of 10 to 13 and 10 and 13. So it's really a special time. I really relish it. And it's funny you say that, because you don't think about that often. And yet you're reminding me of, that did have an amazing impact on me, and probably why I take a lot of pride in being around as much as I possibly can.
Well, before I get you to Wagner College, let me ask you about a little high school rivalry you had with former Pittsburgh Pirates outfielder Andy Van Slyke.
Yeah. Well, I was one of these guys that peaked athletically at about age 8, maybe 9. I mean, I was about 6 feet tall. If they had the Little League World, if they're televising, I didn't make it to the Little League World Series, but I was tough as a kid, and he was my catcher, and he was good, but I was kind of the guy. He batted third, I batted fourth.
I didn't realize you played together. I was thinking high school. I didn't realize when you were younger you played together.
Oh yeah, we were on the same team for a while when we were because I was just a big strong kid at the time. And he was good too, and we played together on some all-star teams and different things like that. Then when we went to high school, he went to the school, New Hartford High School, which is close to Utica, and we were kind of rivals. And I actually dated this girl named Lori Griffiths. Didn't really date her, but went on a couple dates with her. Ended up being, she married Andy Van Slyke. And so it's Lori Van Slyke. I actually went on to a high school dance with, and he signed for $12 million the day he graduated from high school. And, you know, I'm still paying back my college education. So I thought she made a smart move.
I love your cap, but I think she did too.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Very good call by you, Charlie.
Now, let's take you to Wagner. Now, you got into basketball, obviously, for your career, but I believe going to Wagner, you were actually eyeing another sport, correct?
Yeah, I was a good football player in high school, and yet I had some knee problems, and they really wanted Wagner College. I was recruited maybe at maybe a higher level, but nobody wanted to pull the trigger because I had a bad leg, and Wagner said, "Hey, you can make this comeback in football." I didn't love football as much as I just sometimes you just meet a person who's a great recruiter, and you like to coach, and you say, "I'll go play for him." I got a gentleman named Walt Hamline, who was the assistant coach at Wagner College, ended up being my athletic director as time went on. And think about things that impact your life and recruit me to Wagner College. There's no way I wasn't going to go to school with him once I met him, once I visited the school.
Now, at Wagner, I know you played baseball, and you also obviously played basketball. You played under P.J. Carlissimo, who went on to fame as a college and NBA coach. What was it like playing for P.J.?
Well, I thought it was great. I thought he was I thought he was tough, but at that time, the levels of toughness isn't like it is now. You know, people aren't evaluating when people yell at you as much, and he was tough, and he was good. He also was the reason I wanted to be a coach. I just thought the way he carried himself, the way he was with people. I would watch him go to other schools and how everybody seemed to like him, and I just thought I never had thought about being a coach before, but once I had met him. I wanted to be like him. I thought he was a tremendously charismatic person, and I think that's the reason why I got into coaching. People think I'm really close to him because of that. I'm not. It's funny when you have someone who's a coach of yours, you still think of them as your coach, even as he coached the Brooklyn Nets. Hard for me not to call him coach. Hard for ex-players of mine not to call me coach. It's kind of how you visualize people and how they impact your life, and he was an enormous person, and probably the reason I wanted to be a basketball coach.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you about that because I remember you telling me years ago how people just assume you're buds or you're tight with them, and I'm sure you're friends, but you respect them as your coach.
And all his people that are friends with him, I'm very comfortable just calling up and, hey, how you doing? How's everything? Laughing with. Something about when somebody's your coach. You know, they're always your coach, and it's hard to not call him that. It's hard for, I imagine I called him PJ a couple times instead of coach, but that's not easy to do. And that's the type of respect you have, and I guess that's a good thing.
Now, you graduate from Wagner, and you started your college coaching career pretty quickly, although I understand it wasn't in basketball.
Well, it was baseball. I did a lot of baseball coaching at Wagner College, but the whole plan was to be a basketball coach there also, and that was kind of tied together. And the next, and it was able to combine both positions for a couple of years. Actually, 3 years. For 2 years I was a baseball coach. 3 years I was a basketball coach. Very fortunate to get that kind of start because it was a recruiting position. It wasn't a position where I was just in the office. I was 21 years old, and I was at five-star basketball camp, seeing this guy named Michael Jordan and nudging a guy saying, I think he could help us at Wagner. I guess he could. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, you kind of thought, guys, your evaluating ability was out of whack because you didn't have the foresight at that age to be able to say what a kid was. And you'd see these players and say, he's 16 years old, but I think he could help us. I think, Michael did okay for himself.
Well, and I think you were correct. I think he would have helped you at Wagner.
No, very good point. Very good.
Now, you became head coach of the Seahawks, I think, in '89.
Yeah.
And you had a 10-year run. We're going to get into some of the details, but just in general, like, how did it start? Those first couple of years, what was it like?
Well, I began because I was in between Wagner and I went to Siena College, and we had really good teams at Siena. So I didn't apply for other jobs, or it wasn't even considered for other jobs, except that we had just gone on this run at Siena, gone to the NCAA tournament, beat Stanford, and because I knew everybody in the school, Wagner was not a big school, They liked me. I was a good athlete. I was I had an opening and an opportunity to go for the head coaching position at age, I think I was 28, 29 at the time. And again, the gentleman who recruited me was now the athletic director named Walt Hamline. So I had an inside track for this job, and that's kind of how I got started in it. How they get jobs don't open at a lower level or at levels if they're good very often.
Right.
Most of the time people leave a job or are fired because the team isn't very good and you have to start over. And that's really what I had to do at Wagner College. Come in there with great energy and work very hard and get beat bad for a year or two. And then got fortunate in some recruiting maneuvers I did and getting some interesting players there. So I ended up having a little bit of a run for a few years, and then things didn't go so well.
Well, I know at Siena you worked for Mike Dean, who became pretty well known around the country, going to Marquette. But at Wagner, about midway through your run is when I met you, because I was working at the New York Post at the time, started covering college basketball. We got to know each other pretty well. And in '93, you had probably the highlight of your coaching career, which ironically also became a large part of adversity, because you were so close to fulfilling the dream of a lot of players and coaches getting to the NCAA tournament. And if you don't remember, you were in the Northeast Conference title game against Ryder, at Ryder. A player by the name of Bobby Hobson hit a shot to put you ahead with 4 seconds left. And then, unfortunately for you, Ryder guard, I believe, Derek Suber, went coast to coast, hit a shot at the buzzer, beat you by a point. So instead of Wagner and Tim Capstraw going to the NCAA tournament, Ryder and future Rutgers coach Kevin Bannon went to the NCAA tournament. If you can try to go back to that night, Cap, I mean, what was it like just going through that?
It was wonderful. It was an amazing experience. I mean, the Ryder Gym, this was the first year of championship week at ESPN, I think. I think it was the first week. It was a Tuesday night. The game was played at 9 o'clock at night on ESPN. And it was championship. They're billing it as championship week, hoping that something could come of this. Well, it's become a really big deal. And this Tuesday night game at 9 o'clock in a small gymnasium looked really cool on TV. Looked like a mob scene. It was amazing to see how the Ryder Gym had filled up an hour before, 2 hours before the game. Place was crazy. Wagner had a lot of fans there also, and it was just an amazing, amazing atmosphere. It was a great experience to be at that game. Throughout the game, it was back and forth. We had a great rivalry with Ryder for a few years, and it was no surprise we were going to play them. Now the game, how that breaks down, it's funny how you could recall a guy named Bobby Hobson makes a shot. We're up 1, 4 seconds to go. There's timeout called then. And I'm trying to settle down my team. I had a number of players that fouled out. We didn't have a lot of reserves on the floor, so I was very, very cautious as to what they would be able to do. They go back out on the floor. I put a big guy on the basketball, one of those full court situations. Put my backup center, Brendan Kenny, on the basketball. Told him to jump up and down like he's doing jumping jacks. And all of a sudden, Kevin Bannon looks at our alignment, how we're guarding, calls timeout. Well, I out-coach myself when I come back, because I put Brendan Kenny now from off the ball, on the ball, all back is a safety net. Wow. So they were able to make a great direct pass. Now think of it, people might not be able to relate to that. Think of it as Grant Hill being able to throw the ball to Christian Laettner unopposed. Yep. And Rick Pitino catching a lot of heat for that. This is my version of that, because it was the same kind of idea. The ball was able to get advanced quickly up the floor to Derek Suber. He took 3 or 4 dribbles, got about 17 feet, knocked it down to place. Talk about storming the floor. That was before everybody did it, and it was crazy. It was a mob scene. It was a great shot. And then to hear radio, New York sports radio, where I couldn't get any attention if my life depended on it, to hear Mad Dog Russo and Mike Francesa, Mad Dog especially, killing me, saying, "Timmy, how could you take a guy off the ball? How do you not guard the inbounder?" So I'm getting crushed on New York radio, and that was my dream right there. That was one of my chances to be successful. A couple months later, I had a great Yugoslavian player on my team named Misha Mutajic.
Yep.
And there was some whatever went on, I don't know what on, but Dale Brown called me up to tell me that Misha was gonna transfer to LSU.
Oh
I
boy.
don't know what went on. All I know is when I got done talking to Dale Brown, I wanted to go to LSU too. He's one of those guys, you know. He could just get you going. So that kind of was the end. That we didn't win that game, and then we lost our 6'11" superstar. So we were just kind of good team for a couple more years, and then things started going bad.
I forgot about Misha, but two things about that game. First, I cheated, Cap. I looked at YouTube today and saw a little bit. I saw the video, so that's how I
Yeah.
knew Hobson hit the shot. Um, Secondly, I was sitting in the end zone that Suber, hit the winning shot at, and I know as a reporter you're not supposed to have feelings or be involved in the game, but I had to write a Ryder winning story, and I felt so bad for you and for Wagner, but that's the way it goes. And one of the results of that, which at the time was a good thing, I assume, was that people got a taste of it, and they saw how close you guys got to it, and they just assumed that you were going to be able to get there in the next year or two. And I guess in a sort of way, it kind of raised expectations. Is that a fair assessment?
A little bit, and yet then you lose your best player because he transfers to LSU. So that was difficult. We were still pretty good for a couple years. Hobson still had a couple more years.
Yep.
Quincy Lewis was back. We had played well. We beat Miami the next year. I think went down there and played well. Maybe won 15 games or so. We're good, but we weren't great. And it was kind of our opportunity. There was a silver lining to that, though. There was a woman in the stands named Chelsea Brown at the time, and she was in the crowd, and she remembered that game and happened to ask one of the assistant coaches. Was a graduate, so she was just done with school a couple years. She was working in admissions. She had asked about me. We went on a date, and she is now my wife for the last 16 years. So there was a silver lining there. You know what I mean?
I guess you came out.
Not all that bad. It's the bad, and if you've seen my wife, that's a pretty good deal. I'll take that.
You definitely traded up, Cap. You definitely traded up.
People can't believe it. They think it's my babysitter or something.
Let's fast forward a couple of years because you had that great season and you had a good core there with Hobson and Quincy. But then a couple of years later, those guys are gone. You struggle, and Walt Hamline, who recruited you to go to Wagner as an assistant coach, is your boss, and he tells you that he's going to make a change as a basketball coach. I don't know if we've actually talked about this at length, but the one thing you did tell me about that was that you kind of felt for Walt.
A little bit.
But if you can go back to that time, I mean, because I know what it's like a lot of people today, losing a job, especially a job that you enjoy greatly and you feel like you're good at, just circumstances might have been a little unfair or a little different. How did you cope and deal with it, in the immediate light of it?
Well, here's the thing about coaching. You kind of know it's a prolonged firing. It's not a short-lived thing. You pretty much the year before you had to win a certain. In the back of your mind, you have to win a certain amount of games. And then you find out the coach says, "Okay, no, we're bringing you back." The AD says, "We're going to stay with you, but do me a favor, Tim. Win 14 games next year, please. You got to win this amount of games. This is the schedule." So as the season's going on, what your fate is on every day. Gotcha. Every day and every game is, yes, there's a scoreboard and there's a winner and a loser, but there's also your career is at stake. And I felt that way even for 2 years, not just the last year, but the year before. So I think it goes on, it kind of builds for a while, and almost to the point where you kind of know. I knew when we lost in the playoffs that we didn't have success, and you make a good point. I almost felt, I knew it was a weird situation. Most people that get fired deserve to be fired. I probably would have fired myself. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
You wouldn't have had to. You just have to look at it objectively. Even at the time, now I'm not just saying looking back, I could have, hey, listen, that's the nature of the job you go into when you're in coaching. So it's a prolonged pain of a couple of years. Now, within that year, I had just gotten married.
Right.
We're trying, you're trying to think about, where you're going to live, all these other things. But I did I think one of the things I've always tried to do is use humor, relieve some of the stress for me. And I remember going into my athletic director's office after the season, the day after, and walking in and saying, and just saying, walking in and say, you got to fire me, don't you? You got to get rid of me. You got to, because I knew he had to, and he didn't know how to say it. I could see it in a lump in his throat and how difficult it would be. We ended up kind of laughing about it. Yes, you got to get rid of you. Got to do this, and we ended up making a list of potential coaches that would be good we thought for the team. And I didn't think I got a bad. I think most everybody. I'm one of the few people that could ever say that. Yes, it was awful. It's tough. It's hard. I wasn't cheated though. I thought it was as hard on him wanting me to win as anything. That doesn't mean it's enjoyable when it's over, because you regardless, the next day, when you're fired from Wagner College, you don't get 2-3 more years on your contract. I had a month or two. I had like 2 months.
Right. Right.
Very few coaches in Division I sign up for unemployment. I was in unemployment, and people called me coach. On Staten Island, I saw some kids I knew that went to camp. And I didn't mind, but it's a little bit different than these guys that get fired in coaching and say, oh, he's got, tough, but he's got $2 million on his contract. No, I had to pay parking tickets to get my transcripts. You believe that? That's unbelievable. It's not funny though. I mean, it's a good story.
No, I know, but I mean, as well as you dealt with it with Walt, based on, like you're saying, guys are calling you coach and you're collecting unemployment, like a lot of people, and that's a pretty humbling experience.
Yeah, it is. It is, because when you lose your job in coaching, they write about it in the paper, and you might even think, oh, it's not big time. It's pretty big time in your life. It's big time. They write about it. Should he be there? You get to your life and your lack of however people think about you, or your lack of ability, or whatever is going on, is written about. That's not easy. That's not easy. And the fact that should he be fired, and I'm always sensitive to always hearing all these things written, about people. Oh, well, get rid of this coach. Get rid of this guy. Twitter, Facebook, whatever, just crushing people. Hey, that's not easy to hear. Yeah. And I don't think I got a bad deal. I do think that any coach that goes through that has to do that. There's a lot of public humiliation that goes along with it. And again, not just after the fact, building up to it, the year or so or whatever, when you're around campus and people kind of look at you and you're kind of wondering, and you got to kind of smile a lot, and it's a lot of fake smiling. So it's not easy. It was by no means easy.
I'd come to Florida in '97, so I wasn't there when Wagner let you go. What were you thinking in terms of your future? I mean, I shouldn't assume, but were there possible assistant coaching opportunities? Were you looking to stay in basketball? Like, what was your mindset at the time?
My mindset was, I was going to do anything. I was kind of embarrassed. One of the more embarrassing thing was because you just get married. You're kind of like, you're just married and you don't have a job. It was embarrassing. So I knew that this broadcasting thing could be something, though. To be honest with you, I knew that it could be. People had told me, even where I'd gotten to be friends with you at the New York City luncheons, hey, you're good at talking in front of people.
Yep.
You tell a couple good jokes. You're pretty good at this. I thought I could do that, but because I wasn't a major name in college sports, I knew that I would have the long road to it, that I would have to wear people down. So I would I would have to
My
do,
approach with women, right, Cap? Wear them
yeah,
down.
erosion. It's all about erosion, Charlie. It's all about the wear down. That's what I keep telling you. You know, you can go after superstars, just wear them down. So I went after this broadcasting thing pretty hard, but because I wasn't a big name, ESPN wasn't going to say, come on. I
Right.
wrote a million letters, so many rejections, so many people had never even heard of me, never even got a chance. I tried, but I would practice all the time. I would set up a tripod and a camera and read newspaper articles and then talk into the camera and prepare. I would put the TV down. I would do it for hours at a time. I even took an acting class in New York City.
Yep.
I wanted to be able to communicate to people well and be able to, if I ever got that at it, that was no money coming in though. So that was all like some of the spare time things I had done. I we have a mutual friend that I worked for a few months right after I lost my job selling copiers. His name is Rich Weesey.
Yep.
I worked for IBM you probably forgot that, but I worked trying to sell copiers, and it was very hard. People that have to do that kind of cold calling and going to visit people, and I have zero technical skills. I sold one copier. My first copier. I sold it. The guy liked me. I wore him down. I told him I didn't know enough to rip him off. Therefore, I would make $300,
Yep.
and that would be the best you could ever do. And he thought it was pretty honest of me. But you have to make a copy of the sales slip. I didn't know how to make a copy of it. So this is the most humiliating IBM sale or Xerox sales that has ever gone on. I made the sale. I can't tell you how. And it was to some church in Clifton, New Jersey. That's what I did for a while. But I knew that I would have to do something.
I pumped gas for my friend after the post for a little bit. I mean, I can totally relate to what you're explaining.
Yeah, no, and I went out and I would coach basketball, but I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I did give amazing advice from one gentleman that got me. I was feeling sorry for a couple months, and I don't think I went right into work. And I was out to dinner with a friend named George Thompson, George and Debbie Thompson. They're actually Staten Islanders that I had gotten to know in my days at Wagner. And he was the president of Tilcon Construction. And he had looked at me, and he was a very good friend. He looked at me, and he'd always been very polite to me. But he kind of raised his voice like me, not raised it, but was very serious to me and said to me, just work. I don't care what you do, just work. Good things happen when you're working hard. Go after it, and that's what I think got me to go to. I got to get the timeline straight. That probably got me to work at Xerox, got me running basketball clinics and camps out in Long Island, and getting my feet back on. Just work. And he said, I don't care if it's cleaning. I don't care if it's this. No job is too small for you. Don't wait for a job to happen. Just work. And it was the single greatest advice, and it had a lot to do with who the person was saying it to me, because it was uncharacteristic for him to say that, but he probably knew I needed something like that, and it was a brilliant piece of advice.
I know a friend of ours, a guy named Cormac Gordon, who's a sports writer for the Staten Island Advance. I remember telling him after I lost my job at the Post and I was doing some things that I really wasn't too keen on, like pumping gas. He said, Charlie, never be embarrassed to say you're working. And
that's a great way. That's a beautiful statement.
I remember it to this day. I mean, just because you're doing something you don't want to do long term doesn't mean you have to do it long term. It just means it's one of the keys to survival. And we never talked about this, but it's funny how we got the same advice.
Yeah, and you just gotta go. You just gotta get up every day. You gotta go after it. You got to. I think that people that are unemployed at times, they spend all their time hunting for a job. I think you should do that, but I don't think it's a bad idea to work while you're doing that. I think you got to do both. Don't just. I think you'll get stale just waiting there on all the websites, sending out your resume, sending you this, and that will get you, I think, stale. It will frustrate you. I think that's something you do while you're waiting tables, while you're cleaning gyms. And I'm talking about college educated people. I'm talking about if you have a doctorate, it doesn't matter. Yes, you can you can look for jobs, and if something is out there that isn't what you want, I believe you got to go. You got to lower your standards. You got to just go out there and get a job that you can get, because you know that you can work your way back up that stream and just kind of find your way. But if you're sitting at home feeling sorry for yourself and just allowing negativity or frustration to come in, I think that's not good. Plus, when you're out, you never know who you're going to meet, and you never learn. And Alice Dyer, she had 90 years old. Her family is Frank Dyer's mom. Would say, you never learn. You never learn anything staying home. I say you get out, you get after it, you get working, and then. Well, I'm not saying that's all you do. You don't have free time now. You're not going to go out partying and hanging out. All that other time when you're not working, well, then you're working on trying to get another job. But that's your commitment. That's your time. Your social life is over, but doesn't mean you're not working.
Well, and to your credit, and partly because you're a good guy and you're well liked and you have a lot of friends, but largely due to your dedication and your perseverance and your hard work, you got an opportunity, I believe, to do some Northeast Conference games, among some other things. And here we are, 15 years later, and you're doing work for NBA TV. You're the radio voice of the Brooklyn Nets. You just take a glance back now, Cap, where you were and the journey you've been on. What do you just think about it?
Well, I mean, I think it's great, but I do look back to those first 6 months when I was unemployed and how hard I worked. Because here I think is a problem that some people have. You have to be really prepared for that opportunity you get. I think a number of people in broadcasting that are unlike me, that say are superstar players, get put in positions to work the game of the week, their first job, and they don't sound very good. And they're not ready for it because you need repetition. You need to get reps. You need to work at it. So I did my own version of that. So I was happy and thrilled that when I did one game and one time with the Northeast Conference, I finally had a tape. I had a demo. I had a demo that I could show people, because that wasn't the one game that I was going to do. It's going to be my one opportunity to prove that I could do the job. And then I had something real to send out. That took me about 1.5 years to get a game. And then, so I look back at it, and I'm no superstar, or I'm no that. But boy, oh boy, I would challenge anybody to say that they enjoy their job more than I do, have as good a time, and feel as fortunate as I do in any walk of life. I would challenge that, and that's with being. That's with lose. See, I had a dream job one time, and it's not the same dream job I got right now, but I feel like it's a dream job again. There's more than one dream.
That's awesome, Cap, because that's what makes you a special guy, because not only did you work your ass off to get where you are, but you appreciate it. You don't feel like it was owed to you, or we all go through times where we face adversity or tough situations. We feel sorry for ourselves. We feel like, why didn't we get the break when somebody else did? But you know what? You take a step back. In relative terms, you and I and a lot of other people are pretty fortunate individuals. And more power to you to do what you've done. I mean, not that means a lot, but I'm really proud of what you've done, because it's tremendous to know where you were and know the type of guy you are, and you haven't changed. And let a lot of people in that business, unfortunately, can change a little bit, but you're still a great, solid capper that I knew 20 years ago.
Well, that means a lot to me. I do appreciate that.
One thing, Cap, that I wanted to mention, because another guy who faces adversity on a daily basis is somebody you work with, Chris Carino, who's the other half of the radio team with the Nets. He has, I believe, a form of muscular dystrophy.
Yes,
He,
FSHD. It's a form of muscular dystrophy. If I could say it, there's so many syllables, but it's yeah. That's a big reason why I don't. I wouldn't complain anyway. But
no,
you want to see somebody that faces adversity and it's impressive. That's some individual right there.
I was going to say, Cap, because I've seen Chris, at some Miami Heat games and other events, and clearly, he's struggling when you see him, but he doesn't make any excuses. He's always got a smile on his face, always saying hello to people. Obviously, does a good job with you on the radio broadcast for the net games. And you probably don't think about it every day or every second of every day, but every once in a while, I'm sure you do take a look at him and say, wow, things aren't so bad when you have a guy like Chris who deals with what he's dealing with on a daily basis, show up with a smile, do his job to the degree he does. I mean, that's pretty impressive.
Well, I for about 7 or 8 months a year, because we travel together and live together, live our lives basically together, I spend time with a person with a serious affliction.
Yep.
And I tell you what, I try to help as much as I can. It's funny, you kind of become part of it. You walk into restaurants and you see what chairs, how they're set. I do the same thing now. I look for high chairs. He has a very difficult time getting out of a chair. It's a big challenge. You have to hold the chair. You have to look for that. Every building we go into, we check out the elevator situation immediately. It's very difficult for him to walk upstairs. He could if he had to for a while, but not many. Very hard to put his clothes on. Bring his bag to his room, grit his bag every day. It's all minor stuff I'm doing, but just everything he does, and the fact that he doesn't complain. In fact, he has a foundation, the Chris Carino Foundation for FSHD, which is really a beautiful thing that he's trying to find a cure. And him and all the, it's the largest form of muscular dystrophy, but it receives the least amount of money because oftentimes people can give the appearance that they don't have physical problems. They could stand up straight. It doesn't hit them it's a form of muscular dystrophy that usually doesn't affect people till they're in their 20s. And he didn't have it until he was 23 years old. And so people the money doesn't go to these people. And yet there has been some great daylight into some treatments recently, and we're excited. And his foundation has really been really beneficial with that. But you're right. When you look at perspective, he gives me a daily perspective on appreciating what you have.
Cap, we'll end up. I know it's been it's been almost 40 minutes. I just wanted to ask you, when you look back on adversity you faced, obviously as a coach, you had to play psychologist at times, many times probably, and you're dealing with somebody like Chris on a daily basis. If you ran into somebody who faced a serious challenge in their life, whether it's loss of a job, a serious illness, or maybe something that to you and I, not that serious, but to them it's a real big deal, what's one piece of advice you would give somebody facing a serious challenge?
Well, I think oftentimes people who face serious challenges, they think they're alone. They think they're the only person. And I'll go back to my mother right now. My mother would meet people in the grocery store that they knew had real bad problems, and she would take the pressure off them and say, "Let me tell you about my kids. Let me tell you about this and that." She would like to tell the people, "Listen, you have a problem, but we all got them. We all got them. Don't be embarrassed. Get out there and fight and do your best to fight through it. Everybody's got something. You know what I mean? Everybody's got something, and everybody's going to have their days when it's difficult. Now, how can you handle that through when you're faced with that? Everybody has it. It seems like everybody has something sometime. And my advice would be to know you're not alone, to know that you have to continue to look back at other issues in your life that you've fought through that might not be as serious, have prepared you for this time, and to feel like and to have the confidence that you can get through this, and not only can you get through it to be good, but it can be better than it's ever been before.
Capper, as I told you for the last 20 years, you're one of the game's greats. That's the game of life.
Thank you,
Cap,
pal.
I appreciate you doing this. Maybe somebody will actually see it.
That's all right. That's all right. I saw it. I felt good about it.
Hey,
I felt good about it.
I enjoyed it. I think I hope somebody does see it because you had some good comments there and a good. I like the way you said it at the end. You're not alone. No matter what you're going through, you're not alone. So that's awesome.
All righty, man.
Appreciate it.
All righty. You take care. Talk to you soon.
Bye.